show because I am so excited to bring to you right now Nolan Williams Jr. Oh, Dr. Frey. Did I do that wrong? Okay, I'm sorry, Shevry. Yes, Dr. Frey, because we said we were going to start off with you. Dr. Frey, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I don't know how I'm doing today. It's our anniversary show, and Sherry's like, no, no, no. But anyway, I'm so glad to have you here today because this whole issue of alopecia. Tell us a little bit about you though before we get into the show.
So, hello everyone. I'm Cheri Frey. I work at Howard University's Department of Dermatology, and I am a native Washingtonian. So it feels good to be here, serving my community. And my clinical interests are actually in alopecia and pigmentary disorders.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, welcome. We always like, I'll call you my sister girl from DC. Always love to have knowledge folks from the DMV, but particularly the district who are doing great things, and glad you're there at Howard. How did you decide to pursue this area of medicine?
It actually chose me. I was interested in not working directly in the hospital. I wanted more long-term relationships with patients and just found a home in dermatology.
Wonderful. I'm not, I have to ask this. Did you watch the Oscars the other night?
So I was at a conference and I did not watch it live, but trust me, my phone went crazy. And so I was able to view the incident probably just minutes after through our social media networks.
So how did it hit you when you heard that Will allegedly went to defend his wife who was suffering from alopecia? I mean, what was your first thought?
Well, initially, I didn't know what caused the incident. It wasn't until I viewed the recording and heard the joke and saw him approach and then strike Chris Rock. So initially, I was quite confused. I didn't understand, what led to this. And then I was able to view the clip and I gathered all of the information from that.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, were you aware that this was a condition Jada Pinkett has been suffering from?
Yeah, so Jada Pinkett, when she shaved her head this time, she did a post and a video, and I did see that. She described her ongoing battle with alopecia, which is the medical term for hair loss, and stated that she decided to shave her head specifically because of that.
So, it's in your practice, Dr. Frey? Is that tell us what alopecia is first.
So alopecia is a very general term. I think that that's important for people to understand. Alopecia is simply the medical term for hair loss. And there are a number of types of alopecia. So again, saying someone has alopecia simply means that they are suffering from some form of hair loss, but it does not distinctly identify what type of hair loss they're suffering from.
And what are some of the conditions? Because I heard someone say one day that sometimes it's related to stress. But what are some of the things that can cause hair loss?
Yeah,
besides aging?
absolutely, right? So it's known that there's an age of what we call senescence, where we all experience a little bit of slow growth and decrease in density. Some of the more common forms of hair loss are androgenetic alopecia, which is related somewhat to hormones, and that can happen in men and women. There's alopecia areata, which is an autoimmune condition where your immune system is attacking the hair follicles. And then there are forms of scarring alopecia, which may be caused from inflammation at the level of the follicle in the scalp, and that can damage the follicle over time. And then there's a form of alopecia called telogen effluvium, where we get a lot of shedding of hair, and that commonly happens after a woman gives birth or after a surgery. And then there's traction alopecia, which we see when there's too much tension on the hair. So again, a lot of different types of alopecia or types of hair loss.
And women today, we do a lot of things with our hair, right? I mean, we've heard the worst case scenario with the woman in California who actually put Gorilla Glue in her hair. I mean, we do a lot to give it that look, shape, feel, even on the natural side. Are, do any of those things actually contribute to someone as becoming or losing hair?
Absolutely. So there, again, as I described, traction alopecia, which is a condition where there's too much tension applied to the hair. So certainly tight or heavy hairstyles can pull. The hairs are attached to your scalp by these small fibers. And so too much tension or pulling on them can lead to permanent damage to those areas. So there are some specific hairstyles that can contribute. I will tell you that for many, many decades, a specific type of hair loss that Black women suffer from called central centrifugal cicatricial alopecia, or CCCA for short, was thought to be due to things like the use of a hot comb or due to the use of relaxers. And it's only in the last few years that we've seen that there's a genetic component to it. It occurs in association with things like fibroids. So we're learning a lot more about the etiology of these conditions, what causes them. But for a long time, some of these conditions, Black women were blamed for their hair loss. And so that really slowed down, I think, research and development as far as finding out what the actual cause. And some of these things are just exacerbating factors. They may not cause it primarily, they can exacerbate it. So it's very important we know that. But there are some conditions where, it doesn't happen simply because of how you choose to wear your hair. There's a genetic component to it.
And, for women that, well, first of all, let me back up because you mentioned Black women and then the slowing down of the research. Does alopecia, is that a condition that predominantly impacts Black women?
Alopecia affects women and men. So again, alopecia is just the medical term for hair loss. So we really shouldn't assign it to any particular race or gender.
Wonderful. And I want to talk a little bit about stigma or shaming, or just the emotional or psychological impact that hair loss has on individuals, men or women, that are suffering from hair loss.
There are a lot of studies that show that it has a tremendous psychological impact. I mean, rates of depression and anxiety surrounding it, social anxiety. It is a huge burden on patients. And often in the community of dermatologists, we set aside extra time for these appointments. I often have women who are extremely tearful in my office, and we spend a lot of time consoling them. Hair loss is one of the conditions where I think that I see people become the most emotional in my office.
And how do you treat patients? I mean, we all are bombarded, what's the word? Impacted, I'll say, by these commercials that we see on television all the time. Balding hair, use this, put this cream on, take this vitamin, do all these different things, right? And so, how do you treat someone suffering from hair loss?
Yeah, so the first thing we have to do is correctly identify what the type of hair loss they're suffering from. And so sometimes that you need a biopsy. So we need actual tissue samples to determine, is there inflammation? And depending on what we see on the biopsy, we can use topical prescription medicines. We can use oral medicines. There are various injections we can use. We can even use patients' own blood products called plasma, which can help to stimulate hair regrowth in some cases. And then for patients, unfortunately, who've had hair loss for a long time, because it's not uncommon, patients will come in and say, yeah, this has been going on for 10 years. And there are some areas where we can't recover hair. There's hair transplantation for some of those areas as well. So it really depends on the type of hair loss. I honestly get a little bit, I get a little bit passionate, I should say, when I see all of these over-the-counter supplements and products for hair loss, knowing that the majority of them are not going to work for patients. And if anything, they can delay a diagnosis and treatment by a board-certified dermatologist who remain the experts in hair loss.
Is it reversible? Dr.
In certain
Frey?
cases, yeah, in certain cases, it is reversible. Now, the longer the hair loss has been going on, the harder it is to treat. So we do need to see patients sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm. And what would be an initial sign, particularly for, I guess, the most common kind of alopecia that you may see? What are those initial signs?
So I would say the one thing people start to notice is that they can see their scalp through their part. So if you're the type of person that parts your hair in the middle or on the side, all of a sudden now you're seeing more of your scalp. So that's something that people will come in and notice. If you see any distinct spots where the hair is not growing, it's just not keeping up in length. If you're having any areas where you get intense itching or even tenderness, it hurts to touch or manipulate the hairs, those are early signs. So you definitely want to come in and see a dermatologist.
And better to do it sooner than later.
Absolutely. I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah, yeah. And is there anything that you would say? I know people will, with hair loss, I mean, they do resort to hats and wigs and all kinds of things just to cover it up. But,
Yes.
what do you say to folks who think that this is the best way to go now? I'll never be able to wear my
So there
head
are a lot
exposed.
of so there are a lot of there are a lot of dermatologists who will see patients where the hair loss has been going on for so long because we've done such a good job camouflaging it. If it's one thing we can do, we can whip it to the side, cover it up. We'll find a way to make sure that that we can walk out the house with confidence, and that's important and that's great because treatment takes time, right? There are some cases where I'm working with a patient for a year before we see the results. But I don't want someone camouflaging it and continuing to hide it, and years go by because that is allowing that condition to continue and go unchecked. And then we reach a certain point where that hair loss could potentially be permanent. So yes, cover, yes, make sure you feel comfortable when you walk out the house, but don't do that in place of seeing someone.
And I guess the last thing, because we don't realize that men have, like you said, have suffer from hair loss. We see it a lot. It's become very stylish now for men to shave their heads, and this is a way of, as they get older, one of hiding the gray. I'm talking about some of them, but hiding the gray, but also um, hiding the fact that their hairlines are receding, and or there's that little circle in the top
Yeah.
that they get.
Well, that's
Is that all? Is that the same thing?
yeah. So most men suffer from androgenetic alopecia, but there are a considerable amount of Black men that I treat for those inflammatory and scarring types as well. So we can't
Mm-hmm.
ignore them.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, in our society, for men, it's more socially acceptable. Now, that doesn't mean that men don't also carry the psychological burden of having hair loss because they do. But just in general, if we're talking about societal norms, it is more widely accepted for a man to go bald. And even in some areas, it's lauded. People will say, oh, you look great with your hair shaved. Like, they prefer it. And I think now, as a country and a society, we're becoming more comfortable with women with closely shaven heads, and hopefully we can continue to progress in this fashion where natural styles and basically where women can wear their hair any way they want and they feel confident doing that. I don't know if we're there as a society on an individual level, sure, but there's still this societal expectation that women have nice long flowing hair.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Dr. Fry, I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us about this, because we didn't want to overlook the seriousness of a medical condition that was part of the whole conversation the other night. And so we had to reach out, and we're glad that we found you. And I think Shevry put some information up in case people have more questions. They can reach out to you at this. Is it an email address that you put up, Shevry? You want to share that with us, Dr.
Oh,
Fry?
yes. So that I am active on social media. And so this is Instagram, the Skin Doc on Instagram. And then for anyone interested in being seen, I am seeing patients at Howard University's Department of Dermatology.
Wonderful. If you don't know whether you're really suffering from hair loss, but you think you might, I mean, I don't want to call it a
You can still
diagnosis, but can they?
schedule an appointment. You know,
Yeah.
it's always better to come in and be evaluated. I love that
Mm-hmm.
appointment when someone comes in and they're scared about something, and I'm able
Mm-hmm.
to say, "Hey, no, you know, this is okay, but maybe we check on it in another 6 months, or maybe we check on it in a year, just to be sure."
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's good. So yeah, go see Dr. Fry. Let her, kind of look at your hair and see what's going on there, and really, I think kind of helping folks to feel good about, whatever choices they make, with as it relates to their hair and their entire body. So I'm glad that you're there, and I appreciate you taking some time to speak with us today.
Thank you for having me.
All righty. Take care.